Welcome to Carolina Sculpture Studio. My name's Clint Button. Welcome to video number 96 of the virtual stone carving apprenticeship. Okay, we're working on this long side now. I'm going to move. It's nice and overcast. Got really good light, especially for this back side. I've got good control. Usually I'm back another 8 feet or so, 10 feet in the studio, and so I've got pretty good light control most of the time. But now, because we've got this big die for the angel in here, I have to work up near the front of the studio where I rarely work. I've got suction up here, but I don't like it because I don't have the light management potential that I do. I'm going to try to take the camera off the stand, and you can see some of the unevenness in here, and it's basically stripes from where I went down and did it in sections. You can see some of these low spots, but I want to show you how this raking light clarifies how much I've got to do to clean this up. It's not a lot, but I got to do some. So let's see if the camera will show it. Let's see. So you can see some of the lines on here, from where we left a strip, we cut a strip, and then we lowered between them and went kind of fast. It looks like this is the lowest spot on the whole face, but you can see very clearly how shaggy this edge is that I was talking about. And that's not a big deal. We're gonna clean that up, but you can see down here, you got a pretty consistent rhythm of, it's not really corduroy, but you can see that there's lines through here. So I'm just gonna slowly, and then you can see down here on this corner, see there's a fair amount to clean up. Now, by contrast, this edge without the raking light is in the same exact condition. Can you see it? You can't, can you? And that's part of the difference between doing a good job and doing a bad job. Now, or just doing an inadequate job. Now the end here looks really great. That's the one that's all finished. But once we finish this back, then I can spin the stone around. And you can see, I don't know if you can see how much, see the undulation, how it's got lines, vertical lines, and you can see how much needs to be cleaned up here. So this is the asset of being able to control your light and having a proper raking light, because I can move this light. See a lot of that roughness. You can't see it, but in just the right place. See, you come out and a lot of it's muted. You just can't even see it. So by having the raking light in the right place, having good control, and having a single source lamp, I'm really concerned as these lights change and disappear. And we have to use these LEDs that have a whole bunch of little lights in them. You don't have the distinct light pattern that you do from a single filament bulb. So it makes it more challenging. But time to settle in and do some rubbing. I'll address this top edge. I've got a different stone, a grindstone, that's a little coarse, it takes off a little bit more aggressively. You got to be careful, but I can't axe this right now with just a Bush chisel, because what's going to happen is it's going to go in and out of all of the ups and downs, and it'll bugger them up. It'll accentuate the troughs. We don't want to take anything off the bottom. We just want to remove the tops. So we'll probably axe it down into better shape first, and then brick it, and then work on getting everything right. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to get around. I'm going to try to show you. I got to change wheels on the grinder because I'm way down low, and once the wheels get eroded to a certain point, you have to change them. And this is down. This stone for sharpening small chisels is still okay, but for sharpening wide chisels, this is dangerous because there's just no material left, and my narrow one's completely worn out. So I've got, see if I can get good video of this. This is my 1/4 inch wheel, my narrow wheel for doing, take a good look at that. There's your size. It's a CGW, camel grinding wheels from Israel. Don't get all off on Israel stuff right now. It's just a grindstone. Buy a green wheel. This is what I use. I use a 1/4 inch. It's 8 inches in diameter by a 1/4 inch in diameter with an 1.25 inch hole green wheel. Okay, that's for sharpening narrow stuff. Then for sharpening regular chisels, I've got a camel, and it's 8 by 1 inch by 1 1/4 or 1 1/2, and it has the bushings in it. These bushings normally come in these wheels. I've got bushings set up on these. Sometimes you have to shim them with a piece of paper to get them tight, but let me take this grinder apart and I'll show you. I'm not going to show you everything about taking out. You got, 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts. Take that off, loosen this and slide it out, and I'm going to go ahead and strip the grinder down. One thread's opposite the other. One turns to the right, one turns to the left, so they don't loosen up when you're running. And but let's get this apart a little bit and show you what I do, because we're going to have to sharpen that bush chisel, and I can't do it safely with this wore out wheel. Now I've taken the guards off. The guards go back into the suction, and it's really important when you're doing this. I keep telling you this is dangerous work. These grinders can explode. If you fracture that wheel or damage it, especially this skinny one, if you tighten this up the wrong way, you see I've got several washers on there in order to space this to run this small. You can't over tighten this. You have to tighten it enough that they don't move. And what'll happen is when it spins down, you'll hear a and it'll be loose and it'll vibrate, because this one will spin off. This is the one that always loosens up. I'm careful, because if you tighten them up like crazy, there's nowhere to just hold these easily. You can't put a wrench in the end of there and hold it. They're not made like that. So, but these guards need to be on there to protect the use, or if these wheels fracture in use, they blow up and they'll kill you. You can lose body parts, you can get stabbed. There's all kinds of things that can go wrong. But let's pull these off, and I'll show you. And this is a different brand 1-inch wheel, green wheel. I think it's a Connect, or however you say it, KINIC, if you're all up in arms about where you buy your stuff from. All right, let's put this on the stand and see if we can get this showing. I keep a group of tools, a dedicated wrench for these, a dedicated wrench for my stand, and a couple wrenches to be able to do these wheels so that I can take this apart. When you're working, you've got to be able to just take this stuff apart. And see, that's not real tight. You got to be able to take this stuff apart without chasing tools, going to another building. Oh, you forgot the wrenches in the back of your truck that fits it. Everything needs to just be available. And so by my vise, I've got just a few wrenches and a couple of screwdrivers of stuff that I know I use. Okay, see, this is the same size wheel. And it's got your max size and everything on there, okay? So you can use that if you want. I don't know where, that was made in Taiwan. So you can send your money to China or Israel, figure it out. And I know Taiwan isn't officially China. But okay, I've got some bushings. If you buy them new, they come with a stack of bushings in them. And you just push it out and save them. Don't throw them away if you don't use them. You see that one? I've got to put another 1 or 2 bushings on because it's a different size than that. That only had a 1-inch hole, and this one's got an 1.25 inch hole, or 1.5 inches, or whatever it is. And that should be pretty firm on there. Shouldn't have any wobble, okay? Spacer back on. If you do one end at a time, and you should be able to spin it, and it should be pretty straight. You should be able to see that it's pretty straight. And and then spin it. It should look pretty good. It may have a little bit of run out, and when I say run out, I mean it may have a little bit of play right this way. The surface may come in and out. That's why when you put it on, you take one of your old diamond saw blades and you dress it to make it smooth, because otherwise when you put a chisel on there, put a chisel and it's going to hump, and it's going to do the same thing as it does on the stone. It's going to eat out the low spots as you dig back in, and it'll do it until you catch, and then all of a sudden your chisel flies, the wheel blows up, whatever. It doesn't end well. Okay? And it's always this end comes off, but if you do one end first, then you can do the other end. You can hold it to do the other end. This is a Baldor. I'll put this on at the end on the nameplate. But this is a 3/4 inch grinder. See, I've got a couple of bushings that were in this wheel here, and then there's still one left on the shaft. And these wear out, you have to replace them. You know, after all these years, I've got a stack of these. I got to hang them on a wire in the building. Don't forget your spacer that clamps it differently. If you just tighten it without that, it's not going to go well. And this one turns the opposite way. We've got to make sure. You see, that one spins really nice. And that's it. Now we'll put these guards back on. Usually what I'll do is I'll hang a guard on with just one bolt, and then I'll turn it on and run it. You can turn it on without the guards in place, but it's really not the smart thing to do, because they do blow up and they win. So now turn it off and you'll listen, and if it's bad, it'll make some noise. That seems to be pretty good. So we've got to set our guard pretty close, make sure it doesn't hit. When you pull it all out, you really should tighten one of these bolts just to snug it. Okay, then we'll tighten everything up. So, be back in a second. Here's my specs on this grinder. It's a 3/4 horsepower, single phase, 3600 RPM grinder. Now, you can set these stands at an angle if you want. People do that to facilitate a bevel on a grind. Because this advances so quickly on these soft wheels, I'm used to a flat rest. I never angle it. I've been grinding since I was little, and I just don't. Make sure this runs without touching anything. Sounds really good. Now I'm going to show you how to sharpen a Bush Chisel. Okay? We'll set this up. See if we can get this on video. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this apart here in the vise. And you can put a wrench on that and put a Allen wrench in there. The easy thing with these old square nuts is you just clamp it right in the vise. And that's what I'm going to do. Now, you just push it and take it apart. Okay, we got that loose. We're going to take this out. Now remember, before we take this apart, I got to back up. I got ahead of myself. Tighten that back up. I'm going to take this. Now, and this is what they tell you you're not supposed to do. You're not supposed to grind on the side of this wheel. All I'm going to do is touch it just enough to put a flat on all those blades. Run the suction on. And I've got just a tiny, you see those have all got a tiny flat on them now, okay? I'll take this off. This has got a witness to how they line up. And that's the key to the puzzle to put them back together. In the vise, tighten them up, take the nut loose. And a lot of times you got to take a wrench or a hammer to knock these apart. Go careful knocking this out because they'll go all over the floor. Then they come loose. Set your Bush Chisel. That's all the way. That's all a Bush Chisel is. It's just got a slot. You can make it out of a 5/8 square shank because that's literally like a 5/8 square shank, or it might be a little bit bigger than the Bush Chisel. Okay, now just take these tools. I gotta grab my glasses. Oh, I got them. We're gonna turn the suction on. We're gonna dress the wheel. To make sure. Now this one just has a tiny spot in the center where it just barely touches. Just clean it up until the flat is removed. You see, you'll have, if we can get this on the camera, there'll be no flat line in there like this one has. See the flat? You see this one has no flat. We'll just keep going. Take your blade you sharpen, set it to the side, and go to the next one. If it gets hot, dip it in some water or put it down and work on the next until it cools off. Alright, magic of video. We're all done. Now you have to take your chisels, your tools, and you have to check your witness lines. Now see, those witness lines are all wonky. Okay, so you got to put them back in order. Sometimes you'll have one upside down. Sometimes there's been multiple marks cut on them over the years when these things get resharpened and reworked and redone and everything. You got to make sure you know what you're doing. So now we're back to where we got everything lined up. Now, having a light, you see this, on your grinder helps an awful lot. It may seem counterintuitive. We're going to do really fine work with this and just shave stuff. And so with the shaving we're doing with the other chisels, we want the bevel on the grind to be really, really long. Okay, these, because this carbide is so small on the end, we want the bevel to be pretty steep, because these are going to be used basically at a 90-degree angle to the stone. We're going to be going like this on the stone. We're not going to be shaving with it. You never cut with the edge of a bush chisel. You always cut straight on. And so, in order to preserve the edge, and sometimes your tool will be marked as well. This one's not. You got to be sure when you've got bush chisels. We're going to start these in, and once they get in there, then you just have to sort of take a hammer or whatever. You have to make sure that they're completely seated. Against the bottom of this channel all the way across, because you don't want these blades to move up and down. As they get worn, they move there. Make sure that everything's completely bottomed out. And sometimes the old nuts like this, the old bolts that have the taper, are gone. You just sort of got to work with what you got. Like I've said, these bush chisels are very hard to find. They're not that hard to make, as long as you understand what you're making. Line everything up really well, get them nice and straight, and before you put them in, and then tighten them up really well. Now we can go cut some stone. Oh, before we do, let me show you this. To do your 9-point, I think I showed you this already. We'll take a square wheel. See if I can move this over. This is square, obviously. So we're going to take a diamond wheel, an old buggered up saw wheel that we kept, and we'll slowly use it to dress this wheel. And the sparks are the steel wheel. When you got just a tiny bit of spark, that's your diamond. Now, for right now, that's enough. Because when we put a dull 9-point or 16-point on, the first thing we have to do is cut depth. And if you have that sharp, super sharp to a point, you're just wasting wheel. That first cut's got to widen the gap between the teeth. That's very flat. You want to make that gap deep. Then when you've got less material to take off, we'll come back and I'll dress that sharper for the second course, because I'll do that first all the way, you know, either 3 and 3 or 4 and 4, or 2 and 2 if it's a 4-point. And then when I want to get to the bottoms of this valley between the wheels, I'll sharpen that up perfectly sharp, and we'll just sink that last little bit and cut it from all 4 sides. Okay? Well, there's your impromptu grinder lesson. Let's get back to cutting stone. And this is how close my grinder is to my stone. It's imperative you don't have to walk far. Back to work. Well, I think we can probably wrap this video up here and just make it mostly about sharpening, doing the Bush Chisel, swapping wheels on the grinder. I know it's basic stuff, but not everybody's done it. And, you know, it's important. I will tell you, when you start, if you don't have a grinder, you're going to buy a grinder, okay? You sort of got to work backwards. Look at what you can get for green wheels. If you're going to be using carbide, okay? Look at what you can get for green wheels, because if you just go to your local box store and buy a cheap grinder, just a bench grinder or whatever, and then you try to find wheels that fit, you may be pretty disappointed. You know, that's 7-inch grinder. You know, you may have to order stones where you could easily buy 6-inch stones or 8-inch stones without any trouble. You may not be able to find the right size, the right dimensions that you need. It's difficult to sharpen tools well on a narrow stone, because you don't have enough real estate. And, you know, if you've got a chisel that's a 5/8 inch chisel, and you've got a wheel that's a 1/2 inch wide or 3/4 of an inch wide, there isn't much room. And you gotta think about economy in this, in terms of how much stone you've got versus how much carbide you've got, and what you've got to grind. And so an 8-inch grinder really makes sense. And you'll get longevity. I mean, I think I paid $500 for that grinder, you know, 20 whatever years ago when I opened the studio. I just went out and bought a brand new one, because I know exactly what I needed and exactly what I had to have. And I just said, that's an epicenter of this whole shop. I mean, without my compressor, without my grinder, I'd really be in trouble. And so I've got to have those two things. And, to really be able to do this. And so choose a grinder really well. Look at your wheels, where you're going to get them from, and spend the money to buy good ones. And 8-inch, to me, 8-inch really works. 3600 RPM really works. You don't have to keep carbide cold like you do tool steel, you know, like you do with wood chisels, or even tool steel, fire steel, you know, stone chisels, where it's got a temper. There's no temper in carbide, okay? What carbide is put in a furnace and fired, and just like ceramic, and kilned to a certain state, and then it fuses all together, and that's it. You can get this red hot, and it's not going to get soft, okay? So you don't have to worry about that. So you don't want one of the slow grinders, you know, and think that all it's going to do is take longer to sharpen it. It's not going to, you know, keep this cool. But we'll break this off, and you've got to learn how to do it. And if you haven't ever used a grinder, you got to be safe, because they will hurt you. But, you know, sharpening chisels to carve granite to sharpen them on a little whetstone type thing, diamond stone, I hadn't got enough time. And if you're a hobbyist, you're going to have even less time to spend wasting your time doing that. Pony up, buy a grinder, find one used, get an 8-inch, get a real one, you know, and put it to use. And suction is really important. So, but we'll wrap this video up, and then we'll just transition right back into surfacing this. You know, it's the next day. Got different lights. Good to see it come down. It's good to look on the video and see how rough stuff is, because I can see things that aren't always easy. And I went through and marked some of the bad spots that I got to wrap up. After I get this all pretty well cleaned up, then we'll do a wash of the whole thing. But we'll be back and do more of that in the next video. My name's Clinton Button. I'm a granite sculptor here at Carolina Sculpture Studio with a virtual stone carving apprenticeship. Thanks for coming in.